Welcome to the Korea Pro Podcast, your weekly guide to understanding the most pressing and complicated developments shaping South Korea. We're your hosts, Jeongmin Kim,
John Lee,
and Joon Ha Park of Korea Pro.
go beyond headlines as we explain not just what happened, but also what really matters and why it matters.
If you monitor South Korea for work or just trying to keep up, you're in the right place.
This is the Korea Pro Podcast.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Korea Pro Podcast. It is now close to 5 p.m. It is Thursday, July 9th, and this week started off with sad news for South Korea.
Yeah, but it was a happy news for Germany, and it was a long time coming. I feel like it was maybe a bit unnecessarily long time waiting for the news to actually break. Germany won over South Korea on the submarine deal.
Yep, and
But it's tentative, right?
it is tentative. What Canada did was that it didn't announce TKMS 1. It said that TKMS is now the preferred bidder. Now, what that means is that I believe the Canadian government and TKMS are going to enter into negotiations until the end of 2027, and where they're going to hammer out all of the deals. And if the talks fall through within that time, then Ottawa still retains the right rather, to go with Hanwha to get the submarines from the South Korean company. But the chances of that actually happening is really slim to none. TKMS is not going to want to lose this multi-billion-dollar 5-decade deal. So Hanwha is pretty much, for all intents and purposes, out of the game. And now that Hanwha is no longer part of this Canadian submarine deal, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, what I've been wanting to say this entire time, Ryan Reynolds is a shit actor. He plays himself in every single movie. Deadpool is basically him on crack.
What's wrong with Deadpool? It's him saying he is Canadian.
And you know what? I also don't like Celine Dion either. My heart will go on kaput. If I hear that song one more time, my heart will stop. But I'm not taking this personally. No, not at all.
You're not taking it personally. I can see that. But now that you got it out of your chest, John, let's move back to the submarine-related discussion. But zooming out a little bit, now that we finally know the quasi-result of this whole negotiation, South Korea did invest a lot of time and effort into this. As we have been mentioning this for quite a while, we saw Navy Chief going to Canada, interoperability test as well. A lot of officials visiting Canada, sometimes out of nowhere without invitation as well. So they did try hard. But even with so many officials visiting Canada, was it ever really that competitive against company in Germany?
Well, hindsight is 2020. Now that TKMS won, we can all just look back and say, oh, well, of course TKMS won.
It's not surprising.
Of course, nothing is ever surprising to us experts. But, to be honest, if we actually look back, I really thought that the competition was 50-50. I mean, sure, TKMS has NATO's backing, and Canada's definitely worried about the Arctic, and they won NATO interoperability. But that being said, the South Koreans also has this production, this capability to produce things quickly. Unlike the TKMS,
It's quite proven as well, right?
Unlike the TKMS submarine, which is still not yet built, the Hanwha submarine, well, the ROK Navy has been operating that for a while now.
And they were supposed to finish manufacturing like 3 years earlier than what Germany could have delivered, right?
Exactly.
So despite that, why did they lose? If we look at that, I think there are not just industrial, commercial aspect of it, but rather geopolitical aspects and political aspects to it broadly as well, because we have heard things privately on background as well, and we have seen various local media exclusives about nitty-gritty negotiation details so far between Canada and South Korea and Canada and Germany. And I guess geopolitical aspect of it is Germany, they from the get-go, the way that they frame the deal is not just one-off deal sort of thing, but also it's like a broad NATO collective security, already, proven interoperability with the most of the majority of the system, basically. And, and how they were able to say that, this asset, the things that we will be providing, and overall, other industrial aspects, coordination aspects of it, it will be against Russia's expansion. But that's something that South Korea or South Korean company is very difficult to say out loud. And so far, I think that's why a lot of officials kept going in person to sort of show without saying that out loud that they are disinvested. But ultimately, because of these geopolitical differences between the difference of status when it comes to deals with NATO countries, South Korea, compared to a German company, was basically not that competitive.
Now, we keep referring to this as the German win, but if we go back to the announcement that was made, Governor Carney, wait, did I call him governor? No, I'm sorry. I meant Prime Minister Carney.
My apologies to our Canadian friends.
He kept referring to this as the German-Norwegian deal. And so it's
All
not
right,
just
that's
about
true.
Germany. Yeah.
So it's a NATO deal.
It's a NATO deal. And so, yes, NATO geopolitical alignment, this is vital for Canada. And so, again, hindsight is 2020, but the TKMS win, it makes sense.
Right. And also this was something South Korea tried to break starting with the Yoon administration, actually. So there has been this long-standing sort of notorious reputation behind closed doors of South Korea government and also companies, especially conglomerates, that South Koreans are quite mercantile.
Or mercenary even.
Yeah. So they when they see a deal or a potential deal, they look at cost and benefit, only trade-wise. It's only been a couple of years since South Korea started looking at economic security as a thing, right? And so starting with the Yoon administration and with the Lee administration as well, I think the biggest reputation of this was actually in DC, that South Koreans, they will walk away when they don't see benefits clearly. But they try to break out of it a little bit. But then it seems like the way that Hanwha dealt with this and like South Korea overall dealt with this sort of maintained some aspect of that reputation when they were pushing back a little bit against a more comprehensive security ties deal.
Which leads us to a very nice segue about the NATO summit that just happened this week. Now, this announcement that President Lee Jae Myung made in Ankara, it came a little too late for Hanwha, but the response that, not the response, but the speech that President Lee Jae Myung gave, it was pretty much in direct response to this criticism that South Korea has been getting for years now.
Yeah.
And we're talking, of course, about this ROK-NATO Partnership 2.0. Now,
what is it exactly? And what was 1.0?
Well, 1.0 was basically just about how South Korea has been doing what it has always been doing, going after these individual country-by-country deals as exemplified by what we saw in Norway and Poland. But this Partnership 2.0, National Security Advisor Wee Sung-la gave this press briefing, and he highlighted that Europe has this massive budget for procuring defense assets, and this will be around $10 billion. And so this was the big dollar figure that the South Korean side really focused on. But it wasn't just about sales. What Defense 2.0 is really about is joint production, joint planning, joint investment, the key word being joint. South Korea is now trying to integrate itself into the European defense sector's defense industrial sector and saying, hey, we are not just here trying to sell you our stuff. We actually want to join you and, from the ground up in order to actually have these kinds of interoperable weapons that are, no longer the kinds of weapon systems that countries have to think about. Is South Korean weapons going to be able to be a good fit or a good match for their existing assets?
Yeah, but related to this, first of all, the domestic side of that briefing was quite interesting, actually. The Blue House spokesperson, although the international audience-facing speeches were all about the increasing cooperation, a more comprehensive cooperation, defense and security-wise, but still, to the domestic public, it maintained the Yoon administration talking points of, this is such a big opportunity for K-방산, K-defense sales. So they are still trying to bridge the gap between what they are more comfortable with when it comes to framing the defense cooperation with NATO countries. But it did seem like Lee, and especially Lee going himself, after being so cautious attending anything related to NATO so far, it was a big move, actually, for Lee going himself, not just sending Wee Sung-la.
Now, that actually makes sense, that whole difference in approach toward NATO and toward the South Korean public. Now, like you just mentioned, the South Korean government was talking to the South Korean people about how this is a huge opportunity, and they had to sell this, $10 billion, joint production, joint planning. And that's because of this $100 million investment that South Korea had pledged to Ukraine.
And this was also, remind you, the first ever summit since the inauguration with President Zelensky.
Now, it wasn't the first time Lee Jae Myung met with Zelensky. The first time was actually during the G7 summit in Canada.
But like a formal.
That was just a handshake. This was the first formal bilateral meeting. Now, $100 million, that's a pretty big sum for South Korea.
Yeah.
Now, if there is an earthquake in, say, Bangladesh or wherever, the South Korean government will provide humanitarian assistance, but the sums are usually paltry. Maybe the low millions, 1 million at the most, maybe even less sometimes. So compared to that, $100 million for Ukraine, for a country which, by the way, Lee Jae Myung had previously said that South Korea should really have nothing to do with. But of course, this was before he became president. This is a huge sum. And so, the South Korean government had to sell to the South Korean people. And now, on the NATO side, Seoul was saying, hey, we've got skin in the game. We're not just trying to ingratiate ourselves into your internal defense sector. We also have skin in the game by giving money to Ukraine. But at the same time, the South Korean people, here's what we're getting in return, $10 billion.
Right. But I'm still not sure, devil's advocate to President Lee, I'm not sure if this will be persuasive enough from NATO's perspective.
Sure.
If we go back to what we talked about during our previous Seoul circuit, actually, with Dr. Carlo Masala, it was a scenario exercise where we had a provocative scenario testing, basically. If Russia actually wins or claims a win, what will South Korea do? And the reasonable expectation is at a certain point, South Korea will resume all trade ties with Russia. Maybe not immediately, but it is a real possibility. If that happens, will Europe trust South Korea like they did right now?
The rhetoric will certainly cool. Now, sure, the Europeans will still need South Korean defense exports because, sure, the Europeans are trying to ramp up their defense manufacturing, but it takes time.
Yeah.
And South Korea has the capability now. But if South Korea reestablishes diplomatic and trade ties with Russia to pre-2022 levels at whatever point that may be, while the Europeans still feel threatened by Moscow's expansion.
Not to mention morally and normatively, right?
Exactly. This whole trusted partnership, that rhetoric will cool very fast.
And I think that is why President Lee sort of timed President Zelensky summit with the NATO summit and also after the failed Canadian deal, because I think maybe the Blue House is realizing that peace might be something more detrimental and immediate than they might think. And let's move to domestic politics and legislation. This was actually passed before, but it started being implemented this Tuesday, July 7th. 가짜뉴스법, Anti-Fake News Act. Can you walk us through what it is?
Well, Anti-Fake News Act, or the Network Act as it's called neutrally, basically what this law says is that as the name suggests, the Anti-Fake News Act, the Democratic Party has been talking about this for months about how they want to regulate speech on online platforms, particularly when it comes to misinformation or disinformation or deliberate misinformation. And so what this law basically does is that it targets online platforms, but not every online platform. It has to be large online platforms.
Over 1 million daily recurrent user.
Exactly. And so this fits the bill for certain large online companies. Think Google.
Right. And they actually did announce a couple of days ago, or was it today, the actual list of the platforms that will be target of regulation, not blanket regulation. This means that if anyone reports those platforms, certain posts on that platform to the commission, they will look into it and there would be potential penalty. And the 8 are local operators, Naver, Kakao, which was controversial and for very good reason, DC Inside, which is like a right-wing online community, and Nate. Nate, not many people really use it.
I didn't know Nate was still around.
Nate is still around, but it sort of carries a news outlet, news, basically. Naver as well, because it's a portal website.
Sure.
And for an operator, this is more controversial. Google, including YouTube, like you mentioned. Meta, including Facebook and Instagram. X, and TikTok.
And so all these large corporations, well, the way the law is framed is that firstly, there has to be a civil complaint, right? Someone will have to say, hey, there's a video on YouTube where some guy has been repeating false statements that have been proven to be dis or misinformation. Now, this is the key word, knowingly. Now, what the law says is that if these online platforms host these kinds of fake information and profits from it, knowing that they're fake,
After being reported,
after
right?
being reported, then they will be subject to fines. Now, there's not immediate fines. If these companies, if these platforms host this kind of information and then profit from them more than 2 times within 5 years, then they start to get fined.
Right. And so initially this was discussed around operating profit, which was very controversial and a lot of backlash from business and media because I should mention this will be very bad for investigative journalism because it will be very tricky to whistleblow, basically. But ultimately, it was fixed into something like a dual structure where damages claims, it would be 5 times the actual damages made that are proven. And the bigger sum would be the fines, administrative fines. This is the one that you mentioned, which would be up to 1 billion Korean won if the supplementary, and this is a supplementary measure, if the offender repeatedly distribute false information after a court ruling has confirmed it's unfair games.
Now, there are, of course, 2 immediate things that come to mind regarding this particular bill. The first one being how Washington is going to react. Now, we already saw the House Judiciary report about Kupang, about how these Republican lawmakers are convinced that the South Korean government is going out on an all-out assault on American companies in order to protect domestic companies.
Ooh, that was a feisty fight between NIS and US.
Oh, yeah, that was really big. But, now that we have this fake news bill, which will again target American companies. Now, sure, that list
and formally listed.
Now, sure, that list also contains Korean companies, but Korean companies are those that are going to be the most affected, and they're going to be self-censoring. The question is, what happens to YouTube?
Yeah.
How is Google going to police hundreds of thousands of Korean YouTubers, some of whom will upload fake information? Google doesn't have that kind of capacity.
Also, malicious intent, like all journalists have at least one experience having the burden of proof to show that we did not have malicious intent when reporting on something, right? And so how can you know?
Now, regarding the whole malicious intent, the bill does have a provision that says that if this person who's making the complaint about that misinformation is caught to have been doing this maliciously, then that person's complaint will be discarded or whatever it is. But this can only be proven in court.
Exactly.
And the courts are already overburdened with the kinds of cases that they have to face. So
not to mention police, it has to go to police first.
Exactly.
Sometimes.
So if you are a Korean journalist who happens to be working at a startup news company, and someone for some reason dislikes you, and they said, "Hey, this person has been posting misinformation, albeit maliciously," that still has to go through the entire legal process, and people are going to have to pay out of pocket for that kind of legal defense.
And even when they are proven not guilty, they would have already used time and money.
A lot of time and money. And so despite what the Democratic Party has been saying publicly in order to defend this bill, people are not wrong to have a lot of reservations about this bill.
Right. And also, not to mention, as a reminder to everybody, we wrote about this a couple months back. Lee Jae Myung initially, when he first mentioned Fake News Act, he mentioned it alongside removing the only law that exists in the world, only in South Korea, defamation by stating fact in the criminal code. He wanted to remove it while pursue this Fake News Act, which is, let's face it, it's about YouTube, right? It's basically about YouTube. But what happened with the other pledge about getting rid of the defamation by stating fact?
Gone.
Nobody's talking about it. And so because there are these concerns, like even when the unspoken actual target is YouTube and YouTubers, there would be consequences in independent and investigative journalism. And so a lot of media associations, including Seoul Foreign Correspondents Club, issued very stern warning and statements saying that, look, we see why you're doing this, and it's important to keep the information ecosystem, clean. But this will come with consequences, and you should be careful about that.
And okay, let's assume for a minute that the Lee administration and the Democratic Party, they're just benign angels, and they would never in their lives even imagine abusing this law. Let's assume that. they're not going to be in office forever.
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine someday in the future we have another president like Yoon Suk-yeol. Oh my God.
Knock on wood. But yeah, that's actually a very great point. Any legislative systematic changes, it should always assume that the worst type of person becoming a leader and misusing it.
Whoopsie.
Week ahead, we did talk about the politicization of the semiconductor AI data center mega projects.
The 3 mega projects.
3 mega projects, including the Honam area. Because of the political leaning of that area, PPP was sort of criticizing it. But this week, there is a new development. Provinces such as Chungcheong, who is also getting one of those projects, the civil society is actually complaining, protesting it, saying that they were not involved before announcement, procedural lacking of communication, basically, when there are ecological concerns and how it will actually impact their entire life if established the industrial zone.
Well, that does make sense. Now, sure, all of these data centers and factories, they are going to boost the regional economies. But, one of the biggest complaints about these data AI centers is that they could have a devastating impact on the environment and on water specifically. And so for a lot of people to be worried about how this might impact their day-to-day lives without their input, this makes sense.
Yeah. And honestly, one of the most major headlines the past few weeks was Kospi, actually. What's going on there?
Yeah. For all intents and purposes, given how the Kospi has just plummeted, it almost looks like we're in a bear market right now. And this is in spite of the massive profits that Samsung and SK Hynix and LG have made.
And Samsung also won over Nvidia at a certain point, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't matter because right now the entire global investors, they're thinking, is this sustainable? And it seems that a lot of people are very pessimistic as to whether or not this AI boom that we've been experiencing will be perpetual. And speaking of AI booms, SK Hynix, that they have an ADR, that's the American Depository Receipt, which is something that allows American investors to purchase SK stocks without actually participating in the Kospi market itself. Now, on July 15th, SK Hynix will be able to bring that money back into South Korea. Now, we've all seen the news about the won's value just tanking. We're at the 1500s. We're going up and down on a daily basis. But when all of that American money is brought back by SK Hynix on July 15th, there is going to be a very temporary reprieve to the value of the Korean won, because they're going to have to sell dollars for won. Now, I don't know how much that will strengthen the won or for how long, but that is the expectation. And all of this information will be sent to your email inbox by Monday via the weekend newsletter at 2 p.m. So if you'd like to know more, please subscribe.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Ryan Reynolds sucks. Bye.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We'll brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why it matters, delivered to your inbox every morning.
If you want to stay ahead of the curve, sign up for Korea Pro to get a full package of insights, from daily expert analysis to profiles, month in review, week ahead, and more.
And until next time, I'm Jeongmin Kim.
I'm Joon Ha Park.
And I'm John Lee, and we'll see you next time on the Korea Pro Podcast.